I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. And we are joined by Del Norte County Agricultural Commissioner Justin Riggs. Justin, thank you for being with us on Public Process today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, we really appreciate that you were able to make it. And Justin handed me his card, right? And I'm looking at it, and it's like, Justin Riggs, Agricultural Commissioner, Sealer of Weights and Measures, and Director of Animal Control. We're going to find out what all of that means as we work our way through the first hour of Public Process today, and other stuff as well, I'm sure. So, Justin, as we were talking before we went on air, part of the format of this program is to find out a little bit about who you are as a human being, right? I mean, because, we have these titles, we have these public personas, all of that kind of stuff, but we're also like people who've had experiences and those kinds of things. So I guess, like, for me, the question is, what are the values and life experiences that you've had and that you have, which have led you to being the agricultural commissioner in Del Norte County?
Well, I think anybody who saw my place, my yard, would get it instantly. I've planted almost 20 fruit trees since moving here in 2015. I've got my greenhouse, my flowers, my raised beds. I love growing things. I love agriculture. So it's a natural step to, move that into a professional realm too. And then, of course, I've got a dog and 3 cats at home, so the animal side is very much there too. I'm always around my neighborhood, taking my dog for walks, working on training, taking foster dogs home from the shelter. So very much ag and animals are what I do in my personal life too.
So you were telling me, and I hope I'm not talking, like out of school or something, but you were telling me, because we were talking about news and public affairs and all of that you were raised in a household where news reporting and journalism was a central feature of all of that. So, I mean, how did you wind up here in Del Norte? Were you born here? I mean, or did you make a journey that led you here?
Well, I got my degree at HSU, so I've loved the North Coast area. I used to drive up to Del Norte, and mess around the Klamath River in college, go up and look at the cobra lilies on the Smith River, wade in there on a hot day. So this area, after going to school up here, I had my sights set on getting back here somehow for years. So I graduated from Humboldt State and went down back to my hometown in the East Bay area, Hayward, California, and worked for the ag department there. But I had always wanted to get back up here.
So I guess the first question that I have is, I think some of this is maybe obvious. I am not an ag guy. If you have like green things and you want them to die quickly, bring them to me. Okay. I'm just telling you, I have like the brown thumb, so I know very little about this, and I'm assuming, some of it's fairly obvious, but what's the difference between doing ag work there and doing ag work here?
Well, interestingly enough, the 2 counties I've worked in have a very similar agricultural output, around $50 million a year, but how that comes about is very different, and what the departments in those counties do is very different. In the more urban areas, like where I came from, a lot of homeowner issues come into play, pesticide use enforcement, companies going out and making applications at people's residences and us overseeing that. Whereas here in Del Norte, with it being a rural county, we're a little more focused on production agriculture, the lily bulbs and nurseries, things like that.
Well, and that leads me to an important question, which triggered for me when you said pesticides, because I know there are issues, perceived real or otherwise, about pesticide use, commercial pesticide use, related to lily production and or other agricultural activities. What role do you and the department play in addressing that?
Sure. Yeah, our role is fairly narrow, but it's really important. Ours is a role of oversight. So the pesticides that are used in agricultural production, those people, they register with us. We have maps of the fields. We know what's being used where. They have to report that use to us on a monthly basis. But really the cornerstone of that program and what makes it really effective is getting out there and doing inspections of pesticide applications. And that has been a big focus of mine here since taking over. We have a really good inspector. We're out there a lot, and we'll be doing a lot of that in the next few weeks, getting out there and observing these things ourselves to make sure there's not drift, that everything is being done according to the pesticide label, that the employees are protected, that they've got all of their personal protective equipment on, that the safety of surrounding structures and livestock is all being taken into account, that all the rules are being followed. If there's required buffer zones, we're out there making sure that they're being adhered to.
And let me ask this, and I'll ask it. It's a very pointed question, and I'll ask it. What kind of cooperation are you getting from the commercial users who are engaged in using these substances? Because I've heard a lot of different stories about all of this, and you're out there in the field, and so from your perspective, are you getting adequate cooperation, and are these, well, it's a three-part question, and I'm sorry to do this to you. A, are you getting adequate cooperation? B, are they adhering to the laws and the regulations? C, in your opinion, are those laws and regulations adequate for the task at hand?
So we are getting cooperation. Yeah, we haven't had the growers try and turn us away when we conduct an inspection or something like that. I haven't felt that they've been obfuscating us as we work with them. Are the rules stringent enough? That's a tough question. It really is, and honestly, that hasn't been my side of it too much as of yet. I'm starting now, as I was only appointed the commissioner last year, so
okay,
now I've started to have some feedback on those issues to some extent. But our role's fairly narrow. We're more in the business of enforcing what's on the books. I do really want to mention right now, before I forget, though, that there are ways that citizens can be involved in that process. There's a rulemaking process. You can follow a lot of that on the California Department of Pesticide Regulations website. You can see active rulemaking processes that are going on. So if there's something being reviewed and people feel, well, this needs to be more stringent, less stringent, there's a chance for public input. And of course, people can always, if they see something that looks untoward, drift, or or other concerns about pesticide use, they can always call our department, and the sooner the better, because if there's an active drift situation, we need to get up there and stop it, and then investigate it immediately. And a lot of times we get complaints way after the fact, and there's no evidence left for us to gather.
Well, and that's a really important point that you're raising. I mean, and it goes just beyond this, and that's like active and proactive public involvement in these kinds of things. We were talking, and this subject has come up on this program in many instances, that many of these departments, and I'm sure the agricultural department as well, are understaffed and underfunded for the responsibilities that you have to address, just as is mental health, just as is any number of other local governmental departments and entities. And so having active and proactive public involvement in these things can be a real benefit, because if someone knows something is happening and they get a hold of you right away, then you actually have an opportunity to perhaps do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct. It's really important that we hear about these things promptly from the public. Our office is out by the airport in Crescent City, so our agriculture up in Smith River, we're there frequently, but we're not there all the time. So it's just like with our animal control issues, we really need the public to be our eyes and ears out there.
We're speaking with Justin Riggs, Del Norte County's Agricultural Commissioner. My name is Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. You are tuned to KFUG Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet at kfugradio.org. 16 minutes past the top of the hour on this Monday morning. Glad you're with us. So, Justin, we want to make sure that we give out contact information. And since we have been particularly talking about this issue and the need for timely public input, can we give that out now? And then we'll also give it out again later in the program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stall just for a couple of seconds to let all of you who are listening go grab that pen and piece of paper so you can write this down. 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, so you can get a hold of me or anyone else from my department at 707-464-7235. Again, that's 707-464-7235. We are at 2650 Washington Boulevard in Crescent City. We're the last facility on the right before you get to the four-way stop that's going to take you out to the airport or Point St. George. And we've got a nice big mural on our kennel building there, so that's made us a little easier to find.
And we'll give out that contact information again later in the program. So Justin, we talked a little bit about pesticides and that being an important part of the agricultural picture and commercial agriculture. What are some of the other issues related to both commercial agriculture and people who are engaged in perhaps smaller scale? I don't know if private's the right word. Well, let me ask this, okay? I just had this thought. What role, if any, does the Ag Commissioner play in the burgeoning marijuana field here?
Sure. So as far as cannabis, when we're talking about stuff with over 0.3% THC,
it gets very technical, doesn't it?
Yes, it certainly does. We're not playing a whole lot of a role in that right now because Del Norte County doesn't have any commercial cannabis cultivation. So everything that's going on now is supposed to be just the 6 plants for adult use. Of course, there's other things going on, but since those grows aren't licensed, registered, we're not involved in overseeing them. What's probably going to be a much bigger thing for us is industrial hemp. So now we're talking about cannabis plants with under 0.3% THC, which are largely going to be grown for CBD extraction. And I think we have a few growers registered for hemp production right now. It's just kind of small test plots this year, but I think over the next few years we could see a dramatic uptick in that.
Well, what is it again? CBD. Yes, and I know I get confused about this. A friend of mine, I went with them to like a pot shop in Oregon. I had never been in one, right? I mean, because like when I was doing that, I mean, people were going to jail, and like now it's like, oh my God, look at all of this stuff. But I understand that that's a big part of the business, but hemp is also, my understanding is, can be very useful for any number of commercial products, paper, rope, clothes, fabric, on any number of things, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it has been for a very long time. That's a long-standing traditional use of it. This whole idea of extracting the CBD from it is a much newer thing, and I think that's really what's spurred a lot of the recent interest, because there's money there right now. But I think over time, it'll kind of stabilize out a little. We may start to see some more of those traditional uses increasing as well, especially as more and more growers are cultivating hemp at this point.
And certainly makes sense. And I mean, gosh darn it, we need as much quality economic development that we can get in this community. This is just my opinion. This isn't Justin saying this. This is me saying it. I get really nervous when people start talking about relying too much on tourism tourism is great, but some actual homegrown businesses that aren't going to leave when some other place becomes popular is really important. We're speaking with Justin Riggs, Del Norte County's Agricultural Commissioner. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. You're tuned to KFUG Crescent City. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time re-rolling the joint on hemp and marijuana and CDB and all of that. I know there was a tremendous amount of effort put into addressing this task force, all of that. Did the Agricultural Department have any role in that process?
Yes, absolutely. So I, as a county staff member, was on that task force and participated in that process. And so that had much more to do with getting cannabis production ordinances together for the Board of Supervisors, and it was an interesting process. I really enjoyed being a part of that. I learned a lot about zoning and some other issues of concern to the community by serving on that working group.
And I know in other places, they've had real problems related to pesticide and other types of contamination related to marijuana, cannabis grows, in many cases illegal, and kind of out in the middle of nowhere. From an agricultural perspective, are there enough safeguards in place to prevent those kind of problems here?
No, not really.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Because if you have people who are out off grid, buying pesticides from nebulous sources, odds are they're not using anything that's been approved for that product. They've got workers who aren't trained, who probably don't have the right protective equipment. There's a lot of rules regarding how pesticides should be stored. They're probably not following those rules. Not to mention disposal of containers and unused products. It's a real concern, and there have been major problems in other counties with that, especially when you get these large cartel type grows. That's where some really scary pesticides have been found. I have not, in the 4 years I've been here, been called out to consult on any kind of a bust or anything like that, or heard of any major pesticide issues here in Del Norte. So I think the answer is we've been lucky so far.
Well, and hopefully we'll continue to be lucky. And, usually luck has something to do with doing pre-work to make sure that you're lucky down the road. So it sounds like this is something that the community needs to be ahead of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. If you see a grow with strange drums or bottles of pink liquid laying around, or weird leakage out of a greenhouse. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that needs to be looked into sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's kind of green, glowing, goo flowing. No, we definitely don't want that. We're speaking with Agricultural Commissioner Justin Riggs. This is Public Process. So, Justin, other ag issues. I know there's a pest identification program of some sort?
Yeah, absolutely. We call that our on-duty biologist program. So members of the public can bring samples of pests they find in their house, their garden. You've got your favorite fruit trees diseased. You can bring a sample of that down for us to look at. We have myself and another biologist on staff who can take a crack at it. If for some reason we can't identify what's going on, we do have the option of sending things up to the California Department of Food and Agricultural Laboratory. So there's the best thing that the public can do if they want us to look at a sample is to bring it in a nice clean container like a Ziploc bag or a jar. And if you're bringing us a sample of a diseased plant, early in the week is better because we don't want it to sit in the mail on the way down to the lab if we have to send it.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And now this applies to any issue. This doesn't have to be commercial agriculture, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Every citizen of the county has access to this service, whether you're in the ag industry or you just want to know what that moth flying around in your closet is, or, hey, I've got this weird little beetle in my oatmeal. What's going on here? Those are the types of things we can help with. We can help with an ID, and we can help with solutions.
Oh, cool.
We can give people a scholarly article about how they can deal with it, and they can, if they have any questions, they can check back in with us, and we'll help them get it solved.
So this leads me to a couple of different questions, which may not be connected to anything other than what's going on inside my own head at the moment. But the first question I want to ask is, you know, they have these like ag stations at the borders and stuff. Do those really help?
Sure. Now, a lot of what those are geared after are more the big commercial shipments. So they're making sure that any quarantines that apply to that shipment are being satisfied, that the people have a certification. They'll sometimes inspect those plants, and when a lot of those larger shipments, they forward notice to the destination county's ag commissioner so that we can do a full inspection of the plants at our discretion. So that's a lot of the purpose of it, is letting individual counties know what's coming. I'll give you a great example
Please.
of something from those border stations. A large portion of our nation is under quarantine for the pest gypsy moth, which is a very, very serious pest. The caterpillars can defoliate entire forests very quickly, and we don't want that here. So when people move in from out of the area, their outdoor household articles are placed under quarantine at the border station, and the notice is transmitted to the destination county's commissioner, and then staff will go out and check those things. Back when I was an inspector, found the larvae of or pupae of gypsy moth several times that way, and so we clean all of them off, and the people can, you know, still set up their barbecue and swing set as normal, but now there's not gypsy moths in it, and we won't have an infestation here.
And I don't know if this falls under the purview of the agricultural commissioner, but I know there's a lot of watercraft inspections. I just came back from traveling across the country, and you know, it seems, you know, in almost every jurisdiction to jurisdiction now, because of invasive species and all of that. Is that a role that the agricultural commissioner plays anything in?
Yes. We don't have a specific watercraft inspection program here in Del Norte, but we are certainly aware of those pests, and we do conduct public outreach, like the quagga mussel, the zebra mussel. Those are two of the big ones of concern on watercraft, and so we're trying to get the word out to the public as much as possible. Some places there's signage at launch points, things like that, just to let people know it's important to self-inspect. Really. Quarantine and pest exclusion was my specialty back when I was an inspector.
Oh, okay.
And it's something I'm passionate about, and it really relies on the public doing the right thing, you know, not bringing in backyard fruit from an area where there's a fruit fly infestation, not bringing live plants across the country without checking in with us. And we can certainly advise people on where they can and can't send things to or receive things from. But it really is contingent on the day-to-day citizen. It's a system that there's too much going on, too many shipments for us to be everywhere. We really need people's help.
No, that makes complete sense. I mean, there is so much commerce, both professional and less than professional and above ground and underground, for any entity to be able to keep track of all of it without some assistance from the public.
Absolutely.
We're speaking with Agricultural Commissioner Justin Riggs. This is Public Process on KFUG. So, Justin, the other thing I wanted to get to before we move to kind of the next part of this, at least in my mind, is, you know, we have a tremendous amount of poverty in this community, and also a lot, in many ways, it's a food desert in many ways. And I guess I'm wondering what or how or if the agricultural commissioner's department plays any role in that. You know, whether it's helping people with community gardens. I mean, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Absolutely. And you're hitting on something that I identified pretty early on in my tenure here. Was we have a dearth of locally produced food here, and that's not to take anything away from the outstanding producers we have. I really want to make that caveat.
But most of that's for the outside market.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that, and we need more producers of food here locally to sell at the farmers market, and it's surprisingly easy to get certified to do that. It's a quick inspection from our department, and we issue a certificate, and you can sell at the farmers market. We certify it's of your own production. So a part of our mandate is to promote agriculture, and people may picture that as huge 160 acre fields or whatever, but it's agriculture of all kinds, and that includes small producers that are just maybe selling at the farmers market or just want to grow enough to share with some elderly neighbors. And that kind of gets back to our on-duty biologist program. If there's any pest issues that are hampering that production, we can help with that. We can certainly help advise on everything from pest issues to shipping issues to soil issues, whatever, people can discuss with us what's going to grow where they are. We can provide some charts about harvest times for things here. There's certainly a lot of things we can do for someone who's looking to get into the food growing game. I've tried a lot of it myself and can provide firsthand insights on what to put here in your raised beds or what trees to plant.
Well, my guess is probably most people in this community do not know that that's available to them. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that.
So just to be clear, just to sort of reiterate, if you're a person who can grow some food and you can grow more than you can use, and you want to find a way to maybe market this, the agricultural commissioner's office can help that person to do this, right? Not the marketing part, but kind of like setting them up so they're able to be able to engage in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's they need to know what they have to do to sell at the farmer's market, or maybe they want to actually pack their produce commercially and have it sold at a local supermarket or something, we can provide information on the procedures for all that, what regulations are involved, what hoops you're going to have to jump through. Definitely.
And once again, I was glad that you made a delineation about food desert and not disparaging people who are producing here. And one of the things for me, I used to live and work in far eastern Oregon, right? And the community that I lived in, Baker City, was very much a food desert, despite the fact that it was sitting right in the middle of like gigantic commodity farming, right? Because all of that stuff, yes, there was a lot of food being grown, and like 99.9% of it was being shipped off to the world market. Very little, if any, was actually staying in the community. That's not to say that's the same here. It's just the same concept, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's a real problem in many parts of the state.
Oh, yes.
I've actually been heartened by the uptick in food production here over the past few years. We're seeing more small producers. We're seeing more homeowners coming to us, wanting to know what they can plant. I feel like I've seen an increase, but there's room for a lot more. Our growing season may not be as long here as the southern parts of the state, but this is a fantastic place to grow a number of food crops: apples, pears, plums, cherries. You can, if you got a little sun, you can grow pumpkins and squashes, that sort of thing. A little hoop house, you can have your tomatoes. You can grow a lot here, and we'd really love to see more people take advantage of that. Yeah,
I've actually seen some very interesting stuff with like vertical farming and all of that. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and it doesn't have to be like super expensive to get in the game if you really want to do it and you have a talent for that. Unlike me, I'd kill it all, but you don't want me to do it. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. We're speaking with Justin Riggs, Del Norte County's Agricultural Commissioner. So, Justin, I want to spend a good time talking about animal control issues.
Sure.
But first, I want to ask you, what is sealer of weights and measures?
Sure. I'm glad you asked. That's a part of our department that doesn't get as much attention as many other aspects. But the main thing that we're doing in that capacity is testing devices out in the community that are used as part of a commercial transaction. So this could be the scales at the supermarket. the produce scales that are there at the counter. Of course, the gas pumps, that's a big one, especially with what gas tends to cost these days. You don't want to get ripped off.
So are you the guy who makes sure that when that gas pump is saying that it's giving me X amount of gallons, that it actually is giving me that?
Yes, and we actually go out there and test it. We have specially calibrated. They just got back from being certified by the state, 5-gallon gas cans, and we go out and we pour 5 gallons of gas in there and make sure that those pumps are accurate. So there's the big truck scales at the transfer station. We oversee the testing of those. So whatever devices throughout the county, it could be a wire meter at the hardware store, anything that's out there being used to test a commercial or as part of a commercial transaction, we're going to go out there and check it.
And without singling out any particular store, but I mean, like if I go to a grocery store and I buy 1.5 pounds of hamburger, right? Okay. Has your department verified that scale works, even if it's like a big national chain thing?
So pre-pack stuff is a little bit different.
Okay.
So we can go in and test that. We do have the authority to test that, and we're hoping to do a little bit of surveillance on that this winter when some of our ag stuff slows down a little bit. We do more weights and measures in the rainy season
that makes
for obvious
sense.
reasons. Yeah. But if anyone does buy something and they feel they've been shorted on the weight, we're the people to report that to.
We're speaking with Justin Riggs, Del Norte County's Agricultural Commissioner. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. You are tuned to community-supported radio, KFUG Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org, 11:38 on this Monday. Glad you're with us. So, Justin, let's, if we can, spend the bulk of the rest of our time talking about animal control, because in large part, I think that's kind of how we got put in contact, really sort of about that issue, right? So you are the director of animal control in Del Norte County. What does that entail, and what are the resources and challenges and issues that your department and the public is facing related to this topic?
Sure. So there's two really, major aspects to what we do up there in animal control. We have the field enforcement, and then we have maintenance of the municipal shelter for the county. So the field enforcement is everything from your neighbor's dogs just will not stop barking day and night, and you need someone to get you some help on that, to you have a neighbor who has a dog with a festering wound and they just won't take it to the vet. So more of those humane issues, or people who tie an animal out and, without providing shelter or water. And just so people know, you can only tie your dog out for 3 hours in a 24-hour period, and it has to have water and shelter while it is. Mm-hmm. So we get calls about that a lot, or, a dog left in a hot car, dog bite investigations, take up a fair amount of our field time. Dogs running at large, other nuisance behaviors, chasing people. Of course, aggressive dogs are a major issue as well.
So when it comes to this, I'm just trying to think of a way to sort of, encapsulate it. What I guess, maltreatment of animals, of pets, Is there a lot of that going on?
Yes. Yeah, there is. And there's kind of several different aspects to it. In many cases, here at this point, it's a financial issue. People aren't taking their animals to the vet. They can't, or so they claim. It's hard, the truth is always hard to suss out in those situations, but, nonetheless, the animal needs to get care. And there's also a lot of issues with people just not providing proper shelter. The weather here, you're keeping an animal outside in the winter. You have to provide shelter adequate to the conditions, and that's a big problem here. Okay,
so this is one of those things that I I feel I want to make it really, really clear that this is Mike Thornton talking at the moment, not Justin Riggs. Because what I just heard you say, I want to be really clear about this. I just heard you say that with the type of winters we have here, you can't keep an animal out in that, right?
Oh, well, I wouldn't want to go that far, but you're going to have to provide
some sort of shelter or something, right?
I mean, and the kind of shelter you need here versus, say, San Diego is going to be a whole different ball game.
Yeah, and once again, and this is why I'm trying to make it very clear that this is me talking, not you, is because I hope some of the people who want to bang on homeless human beings all the time will hear the fact that when it comes to animals, we are expected to provide some kind of shelter for animals. Maybe we might consider doing the same kind of thing for human beings. That's my rant. That's not Justin's. I'm making that plain. So we have maltreatment. Some of it is financially based. Some of it is maybe related to people who are homeless who have animals. Can I surmise some of that?
Sure.
Okay. So that's part of it as well. Part of it is people who have dogs, and primarily, I guess, dogs, who they're just letting run all over the place and chase and bark at people and bite people and all of that.
Absolutely.
How many animal control officers does Del Norte County have?
We have 2 animal control officers. It's important to note that they also have considerable responsibilities as far as animal care goes at the shelter. So it's not like they're out in the field all day. They still have anywhere from the mid-20s to the mid-40s of dogs to take care of back at the shelter. Plus, if we happen to have livestock at the moment, that can take a lot of care as well. So those 2 officers, along with some part-time help, have to both handle all the running the shelter and taking care of all the field enforcement.
Do you often have livestock other than dogs and cats, I assume?
Pretty frequently. It just, you never know. It varies. And then sometimes, of course, if there's a large seizure, having dozens of livestock animals is really disruptive to our facility.
What would cause a seizure of? I mean, I guess my question is because I don't know. What would cause you to all of a sudden have an influx of livestock? Why would that happen? I mean, I could see like a fire or something, but
yeah, without commenting on specific cases,
right.
I think I can give you some kind of general examples. So you could have a hoarding situation where somebody has dozens or even over 100, animals that they just can't really properly care for. They don't have the space. They're developing health issues, that sort of thing, living in squalor. That's a way that's on several occasions we've had large influxes. The other main thing is abandonment. People will just move away and leave livestock at a property or in a field. Same with dogs and cats, for that matter. So,
we're speaking with Justin Riggs, Del Norte County's Agricultural Commissioner, also Director of Animal Control. You're tuned to KFUG, Crescent City. So, Justin, is the local shelter, is that a no-kill shelter?
It's what's referred to as a pro-life shelter. So,
what's the difference?
Well, there really probably aren't shelters that are truly no-kill, because you may need to euthanize an animal that is suffering. When a veterinarian says, hey, it's time. And that's my policy, is if the veterinarian thinks that the animal is suffering, needs to be euthanized, then we go ahead and do that. There can also be temperament issues. Dogs that just aren't adoptable. California's euthanasia laws are pretty clear about that, if a dog is adoptable, that it be given a chance. But not all dogs are adoptable. They can be dangerous. They can just have a propensity for unprovoked bites that, we can't rehabilitate.
Right. Well, I had a Rottweiler, with great dog, and this is many years ago. And then I don't know what happened to the dog. The dog just went nuts. And my granddaughter, who was like 2, was running by him, and he snapped right at her head. I mean, missed her, you know what I mean, but would have taken half of her face off. And we wound up having to have him put down because it's just too dangerous to have him around with a baby. So, yeah, I mean, I get that part makes sense. And I'm not asking this question to, like, be judgmental. I'm just trying to get an understanding of how many animals come through there in a year, and then, you know, some sort of ballpark figure of how many of them need to be euthanized.
Sure. Yeah, it's usually between 300 and 400 intakes a year. Yeah, and we euthanize about 5 dogs a year.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds like a very small percentage.
It is. You know, a no-kill shelter can even be defined as a 90% survival rate.
Okay.
Whereas, you know, we're in the high 90s. So
Okay.
it's a good record for a municipal shelter to have.
Has that always been the case here, or is that something that you've kind of implemented?
No, I definitely can't take credit for that. It was implemented back in about 2009. The shelter became a pro-life shelter.
So here's a question, and so it sounds like a lot to me. And as we've said before, and as you've said, you've got 2 animal control officers. They're having to deal with animals at the shelter, plus going out into the field. I'm going to go on the basis that you probably don't have the resources to do what it is that you're actually being tasked to do. Is that a fair assessment? Did I put that too pointed? I apologize if I did.
Well, I think we face similar staffing challenges to many agencies here. So, you know, we do our best each day to get out there and tackle as many of the issues as we can. You know, always making sure to keep a focus on the animals in our care, making sure we're taking care of them, and then we tackle as many issues out in the community as we can that day, and that's how it is day in, day out.
What would make things better? Easier, more effective,
sure,
more efficient.
Our shelter building is going to turn 50 next year, and it does not have any of the modern conveniences that newer buildings have that make animal care easier and make life better for the animals. So certainly that would be helpful. We can always use more volunteers. I cannot emphasize enough how important our volunteer program is. Thousands of hours a year of donated volunteer time, and that's what gets the dogs most of their enrichment, their walks, that human contact and attention. Volunteers help show the dogs for adoption, photograph them, play with them, socialize them, train them, so on and so on. You know, we have our foster care program. We have people who take dogs on transport runs to other rescues. We come out with a new wish list every quarter so people know what we need donations wise. There's a lot of ways for the community to get involved and help us, and that has really been, I would say, the largest factor in us moving the shelter forward has been increased community involvement.
About how many people volunteer at the shelter on a regular basis?
On any given day, we'll probably have at least half a dozen come through.
Really?
Through the
Every
course
day?
Of the day. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But some days it can be quite a bit more, and some days it can be less.
Sure. So you talked about wish lists and all of that. What's the kind of thing that goes on wish lists?
Sure. Well, I'll give you an example of.
Wait a minute. He's pulling out this gigantic piece of paper.
Right.
Not really. I lied about that part.
Well, for example, I just put pill pockets on our wish list for this quarter, so they're kind of this pliable gummy material that dogs absolutely love, and they have a little hole in the middle, and you can put a pill in there and fold the ends over, and it's a quick way to give medication to a dog. And at home you may have some cheese or whatever favorite hot dog, whatever favorite item of the dog's is, but for our staff, the pill pockets are really handy as part of the morning routine, just to load up the meds and give them to the dogs quickly. So something like that, flea treatments, tennis balls, tarps, those are some of the things that we're frequently asking for. Canned dog food is another common one.
So it sounds like dogs are the main issue. Am I right about that?
Yes. Right now we have one bunny who is adoptable. If anyone's interested, a cute little black and white bunny, very handleable. But no, other than that, right now it's all dogs.
Okay. So how do these dogs get, I'm trying to say this the way I mean it, how do they get medical veterinary treatment that they may need? I mean, who does that diagnosis? Who provides that treatment? How does that happen?
Sure. So a veterinary concern will sometimes be expressed about, say, a dog we already have by a volunteer staff member, or a dog will come in and, a staff member will notice that it has an injury, and usually I'll assess it and we'll decide to contact one of the local veterinarians for an appointment. We utilize all three of Crescent City's veterinarians for these services, and they tend to either give us a discount or they throw in quite a few freebies for us to help us out. Maybe they feel the dog would be better off hospitalized overnight, and then they don't end up charging us for that or something like that.
So it sounds like it's a bit of a kind of a contract affair, but not at full rates is kind of what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. And, I should be clear that we certainly aren't able to take every dog to the vet that we'd like, that we have a limited county budget for that. And then also donations help with that. We have a donation account at Four Paws Pet Hospital where people can just directly donate money that will only be used for veterinary care for the animals.
Oh, so they could sort of like pay it forward in a way by, saying, hey, I'm going to put some money in this account, and if the shelter needs to bring a dog, they can bring the dog, and there'll be money to cover the services that the dog may need.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a interesting thing.
It certainly is, yeah. And people can make shelter donations too, and we're able to use those funds for veterinary care as well.
So let's talk about how people can do that. We talked earlier about, if you have ag issues, you can certainly contact Justin and or people at the Ag Commissioner's office. So what about donations? What about helping out with the animal shelter? What are the things you need the most? What are the best ways for people to make sure that you have those things?
Well, again, the volunteering. So come down and get a volunteer application from the shelter, or you can call us. We can email you one. We'll get it to you through Facebook, whatever we need to do to get new volunteers on board. Otherwise, our wish list is available at the shelter. We send it out with our annual licensing paperwork as well. And we also try to post that from time to time on social media. So we're always in need of flea treatments, the pill pockets, toys for the dogs, canned food. Those are items that always seem to end up high on the list. I always encourage people, though, if they're looking to go out and buy something, hey, give us a call real quick and see what we need right at that moment. That's the way to maximize your donation support, is, to find out what we truly need in the moment.
Well, and I guess, so here's a question that I'll ask, because I know this happens in other types of efforts where people are donating, is I go, I'm going to go out and buy all this stuff. Great. But what we really need would be is if you would just give us the money, because we know what we actually need. Is it better to just get cash?
In many cases, it certainly can be, or say gift cards to places where we can get a lot of the things that we need. Some of the local businesses that sell animal supplies, that's a real value for us too. Especially say if people want to make sure their dollars support a specific business, that's one way to do it. But yeah, absolutely, monetary donations are always helpful.
We've been speaking with Justin Riggs, Agricultural Commissioner for Del Norte County. So, Justin, any final thoughts for our audience today?
Well, again, I just really want to reiterate how important community involvement is going to be to take the shelter where we would like it to go in the future. So everybody who's passionate about it should find some way to get involved, whether that's directly volunteering or watching our social media for when we need specific types of support. But we're not going to get the new facilities we want out there. We're not going to have the resources we need if it's not a whole community effort. And I've seen the power of this community firsthand when I've put out calls. I mean, when I do a bed drive, we get twice as many as I ask for. That's the type of community that we do have here. We just need people, everyone, to step forward and pitch in at the shelter.
So let's make sure that everybody has an opportunity. I'm giving you that opportunity now to once again grab that pen, that piece of paper, your phone, so you can type this stuff in, whatever it is you need to do. This is me stretching to give you time to do that, because I am going to ask Justin to give you the contact information again, and I'm going to do that right now.
Okay, so we can be reached at 707-464-7235. Again, that's 707-464-7235. And we are at 2650 Washington Boulevard in Crescent City, California.
Del Norte County Agricultural Commissioner Justin Riggs, who's also the Director of Animal Control and Sealer of Weights and Measures. Thank you for being with us on the program today. I really appreciate it. And I hope you'll come back, because, this is clearly another one of those issues that will be going on. And maybe we can find a way to make sure that it remains in the public eye and ear, so folks can participate, because we know that they want to if given the opportunity.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate you being here. We'll be back in just a few minutes with our next guest, who's in the house, Del Norte County Supervisor Roger Gitlin.